Alright, sweetheart, what's up, guys? Your boy McKinley Crain here, and today I'm going to be doing my spoiler-free movie review of the movie that I just saw last night, which was the latest film from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was Eternals. Now, let's get into it. So, like I said, I went and saw this yesterday night, and I still have my ticket. I was super excited for this film, and I was a little bit familiar with the Eternals characters. I've never read any of the Eternals comic books, but I've been familiar with the characters, and I've been a Marvel fan for almost all my life. So, of course, I knew, a little bit about the characters, and I knew a lot about the MCU. I had seen every other MCU film ever going into this movie. And now I'm going to tell you what I thought of this movie. And I'm also going to tell you, the basic plot of this movie. So this movie is about a group of, eternal beings created by celestials, like a celestial being, that were sent down to Earth to fight the deviants. The deviants are just these supposed planet-destroying creatures of destruction. And the Eternals can't go home until all the deviants are dead. Or unless... And they also can't go home unless they're instructed to by the Celestials. And in this movie, they kill off, they think that they kill off all of the deviants, and they're just living their normal lives, and then more deviants start showing up, and then they realize that they need to come back together to fight the deviants. And along the way, they discover that there's something more to the situation that they're not seeing. And that's the part of the movie. That's the general basic part of the movie. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of the characters. They were all great and very well played. There's a lot of strong acting in this movie. From some actors more than others. But everybody in this movie is great. And that's part of the reason why I love this movie so much. It exceeded my expectations, by the way. I was expecting a great film, but I wasn't expecting this film to be as great as it ended up being, especially since I saw a lot of the mixed reviews it was getting. I was just like, this might be one of my least favorite MCU movies. And it's not one of my least favorite MCU movies. It's not one of my favorite MCU movies, but it's not one of my least favorite MCU movies. It's middle of the road in my MCU ranking. But I don't dislike any of the MCU movies at all. So, middle of the road isn't bad. Isn't a bad place to be in my MCU ranking. I love the visual effects in this movie. They're great. The CGI is just astounding, and the visual effects are just marvelous and beautiful, and are some of the best I've seen. And I love like the use of color in this movie. It just really makes the tone work very well. And I love the dialogue in this movie. The dialogue in this movie is great, and I love the pacing. Yes, this movie can be slow at a lot of times, but slow in a good way. And it's directed by Chloe Zhao, who is infamous for having directed a few past movies that have been incredibly slow, and a lot have had the two other Chloe Zhao movies that I've seen have had like little to no plot. So when I heard that Eternals was going to be directed by Chloe Zhao, I was ready for there to be a lot of, like slow pacing and stuff. I expected that, and it worked. It worked not surprisingly well, because I expected it to work, but it worked better than it worked even better than I expected it to work. And I love the action in this movie. It's great. There's not as much action in this movie as like there is in like all the other MCU films, but there's still a lot of action. And this is still technically an action movie. It's a drama action movie. There is some comedy in this movie, though. There is some humor, especially from Kingo, who is like the comic relief of this movie. And the humor that is in this movie is it's great humor. And it'll make you smile. Or laugh. And there's a lot of emotional payoff and emotional moments in this movie that really work and really like kind of coincide with the performances. Like, the emotional moments in the performances kind of like have like a mutual symbiosis where they like help each other out. You know what I'm saying? The performances really work, and they lead to a lot of emotional moments, and the emotional moments are part of what make this film so great. And just all the little twists and turns in this movie were great and very well structured. And I noticed that this movie had one of the best structured stories in the MCU, which I found to be awesome. And I loved everything about this movie. I loved like how deep it was. I loved the whole tone. I loved the whole original and unique tone of this movie. I loved just everything about this movie. And it just all worked for me. Everything in this movie worked for me. It was just awesome and perfect. And very satisfying and emotional, and it made me feel emotion. When it tries to make you feel emotion, it makes you feel emotion. It's that kind of movie, and it's awesome. I wasn't bored once during this movie. I heard a whole bunch of people, like critics, say that this movie is boring, but this movie isn't boring at all, despite it being slow. It's not boring at all. And even if you're bored by the story, you don't even have to pay attention to the story to be entertained by this movie. You can just look at the visuals. Because the visuals, like I said, are amazing and spectacular. Like this movie. Anyway, I'm going to give this movie a 100%. Oh, by the way, before I finish what I was going to say, this movie also has great character chemistry between its characters. And great character development, despite what a lot of other people have been saying. Anyway, I'm going to give this movie a 100% out of 100%, which is the equivalent of an A+. Like, subscribe, join the notification squad. I will return.